I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Back on this rap-ish, I ain't even broke a sweat, homie, this practice. Pondering my next move, staring at my track list, hope I ain't miss my window. Praying like a Baptist, Seattle's own. Tired of this Game of Thrones. They made a list of the best rappers, and guess who wasn't on? While the disrespect continues, I'm steady packing these venues. Guess if you ain't at the table, you on the menu. And I'm that spitter, baby. They don't want you to see, but everybody's south of Capitol Hill's rocking with me. Boys smoke the trays and plan to getting their life together. I'm comfortable with my role, so I'm like, whatever. I ain't got a job, but I work hard. And you don't work hard, but you got a job. The irony is I'm judged while you feel the applause. I'm slept on, that's why I had to set this alarm. My dudes is armed, I'm armed with this arm charm. Body banging like she got that cream from Barry Bonds. Yeah.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
That Dre season is here, a real hitter with a mic, I'm everything that they fear. With that hood ain't the same, I was all on their ass, I'm level-headed. So yo, my dudes love when I spaz, and I'm so over Seattle's passive-aggressive attitude. They don't call you back, what they really saying is F you. While I'm from the same place, I move at a different pace. I prefer if you just said it to my face, damn, I did it.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Average dudes with they average spit, writing average rhymes, knocking average chicks. The closer I get, I can feel the people starting to shift. I'm loyal to a fault, and everybody can't come with. Rap's a rich man's game, I'm only playing with change. They bang models and singers, I'm knocking my own flame, I'm different. The crowd, I move with the chosen few. Black thoughts, I could be the front man for the roots. No diamonds and gold, I'm on my sticks and stones. If we can see your panty line, you should have on a thong. My team is strong, through this fire we forged a bond. And they already know what it is when I get on to the hearse. Party like it's December 31st. When I'm on my deathbed, I probably cracking my nurse. You ain't got the bars to compete. I'm a verbal athlete, deflating these boys so they say that I cheat. Damn, I did it.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Yeah. I should probably start by apologizing for the long wait, man. You know, I know I be tripping. But I'm not just a rapper, I'm an artist. And, you know, my creative process is a little bit different than most. Nonetheless, I want to welcome everybody out to the Dre's Experience. I got TCF in the building. My whole camp's here with me. I got the band in here laying this cool-ass vibe. And I'm Seattle's own. Let's get into it.
Welcome, everybody, to the Morning Update Show. I am your co-host, Trey Holiday, here at the Holiday Studios today on Mommy Duty a bit, but always happy to be in partnership with my brother partner, Big O. What up, Big O?
Trey Holiday, you look nice and comfortable there, man.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Sometimes we got to make it happen. We're always here for the show. You know it, brother. How are you this morning?
Yeah, I'm all right. I got a studio to myself. Got a little elbow room over here. I can't complain.
Right on. Looking real good in that hat, brother. I know you're going to constantly be sporting this good old Mariners gear.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I got an overlay here before we jump into the show. The boys are back in town, and we hit the safe yesterday. Unfortunately, I hope we're not bad luck for the M's. At least I know I'm not. Might be Grav brought. The M's got spanked up last night, 6-0 by the Sox. But man, we had a great time there. It's me, Eric Calligraphy, Jake Gravbrot, man, there at Safeco. So great time for all last night. But
right.
We're doing good. I'll take this opportunity right now. Welcome everybody to the Morning Update Show, and remind you, right now, this is the perfect time to tag and share the screen. Go ahead. I'm looking at the screen. Go ahead and share the stream with people who you know could appreciate culturally relevant news and information emanating from right here in the Emerald City. I got a good show lineup for you. We got a little bit of breaking news coming out of Olympia. that we're going to hop into here real quick before we go into this George to the Derrick Chauvin trial update. Got an email here from Paula Sardinas. You remember Paula?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Lobbyist
so Paula,
with WBBBA.
Right. So Paula, she's a career lobbyist and also a member of the WBBBA, Washington Build Back Black Alliance. And then also she's one, I think she's on the Cannabis Equity Task Force. Excuse me. Well, email went out this morning, but between her and there's another lobbyist, I think, who represents the owners named TK Bentler. And now there's accusations of racism and bullying and some of everything else. We're going to be talking to Paula Sardinas here, but she sent out an email saying that basically this lobbyist TK Bentler is trying to. I understand my email is being shared. If you're disseminating it, it constitutes bullying under both the PDC and House ethics. And so what's happening here is Paula Sardinas is saying that potentially TK Bentler, who, like I said, represents some of the other owner operators in the cannabis industry. But the big discussion is that the group that Bentler represents is basically saying here that they're okay for some of these licenses to go to black people as long as it's not inside of Seattle or inside of Tacoma. And Paula clapped back. And then in clapping back to TK went and sent an email to all these legislators, and now it's reached the public level here. Don't have a lot of details. This just came out, but I'm going to tell you, it's continuously been an uphill struggle to try to get any kind of equity around cannabis for black people out of Olympia. But it looks like they might have met their match down there in Paula Sardinas. She's definitely not backing down. She'll be here on air to tell us what's going on in Olympia.
Wow. I mean, you are so right when you talk about the uphill battle that so many Black community members have had to face with regard to equity in cannabis. And, you know, the dichotomy is very stark when we talk about the numbers and realizing that Black people were some of the main targets around marijuana charges when it was heavily criminalized. We've seen that. And really, there are so many amazing equity measures taking place across the country that Washington State can glean from. So I'm happy to learn more about this, man, and dig in. And you know what? I can't believe that they would say as long as it's with, not inside of Seattle or Tacoma, which we know primarily is where majority of Black people are. And so, I mean, that kind of opens up some opportunity for South King County residents, because I didn't hear Auburn, Kent, Renton, or Federal Way included in that. However, it still is a heavy measure to try to take such a big blow when we're talking about folks who are really working toward cannabis equity. It is an uphill battle for sure.
Right. And so some of the language here in this email, this is Paula Sardinas to TK Bentler. The days of white lobbyists bullying Black lobbyists in secret text message, phone calls, and emails is over. Expect a PRA request to be forthcoming. Everyone should know the lengths the current industry is willing to extend itself to keep Black folks from advancing their interest in cannabis. Apparently, we need to amend the code of ethics regarding what is acceptable contact by PDC registered lobbyists. If you don't believe your conduct to be racist, why are you sharing my emails? Do you do this to white lobbyists or just Black women you can't bully? I'm asking for a friend. P.S. I'm not scared. Please share that.
I like that message right there. Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, Black woman magic all over that. You know what I mean? Don't get Paula wrong. Paula came on this show with a lot of fire, and it's clear that fire continues in that language to TK.
Something else, and this is previously in the thread, it says when TK Bentler sent an email to Paula Sardinas saying that basically there shouldn't be any of these equity licenses in Seattle or Tacoma. Paula sent back, TK, is this a joke? The white owners are eating billions of dollars in profits like pigs at the trough, and you want to offer Black folks with a knee on their neck scraps as they're mourning the death of George Floyd. Scraps them, keep them out of Seattle and Tacoma. On a scale of 1 to racist insult, this is a 12. Most of the current owners have had nearly a decade head start. We have offered to partner with existing owners. We have invited you guys to the table and been transparent. This is not negotiating in earnest. On behalf of Black people tired of oppression everywhere, this is a no on this amendment. We'll kill the bill, and I'll get what we want another way. We'll never intend to move a ton of stores in Seattle, but we won't be told by the current owners where we can and can't compete. Pepsi does not tell Coke where to stock its soda. You do not determine how liquor stores can compete. Why cannabis? In case you need a reminder why we do this, here's a single picture. How long do you guys want to keep your knee on the necks of Black folks who've been in the face of the war on drugs? We'll start the clock in 9 minutes and 29 seconds. We were clear in this email this weekend what we needed to move the bill. If we don't have these options in the bill, I have other options the community can pursue. We are unbothered and unworried. The bill can die. We'd rather have no policy than bad policy. And man, Paula goes on here. But whoever TK Bentler is, I mean, I didn't know who he was an hour ago. I looked him up now. But it looks like Paula Sardinas and this equity commission down there in the fight for their life down in Olympia, man, to try to bring some fairness around these cannabis licenses to the Black community.
Absolutely. And it's worth it. I mean, this is a real fight that when we're talking about exactly what she said there, they've had a decade in terms of making profit hand over fist. And it's unfortunate that Black people have really been kept out of this industry. It was you and I who called to bear the fact that Sean Kemp probably did not have majority ownership in the shop that they were claiming was Black owned. And folks had to write a new statement. They had to come out clean and say what the truth was. And it's one of those things where, we will not be tokenized in this regard. We will not take the scraps, as Paula said. And it is true. Here we have a nation that is mourning the death of George Floyd and so many others. It is about time that we understand what equity really means, and that is ownership, period, point blank. And so I'm glad that Paula is really taking a firm stand here, because we can't just fall for the scraps. And I also think that it's important to note that there is strong legislation and lobbying happening with regard to cannabis equity. Again, there are, different programs that we can glean from across the country. We need to be really leading in this space. Folks in the cannabis industry say Washington has some of the best conditions for cannabis growth. And yet here we are, another industry where Black folks are kept out. Oh, it's unacceptable. And I agree with Paula 100% that no policy is better than bad policy. We're not going to take those scraps, man. I'm glad she's fighting firm.
Right. And, I'll say this, and we'll move on, because we're going to have Paula on here sometime this week, is that all of these people who are running for public office, excuse me, that are coming in here, we've had a few people running for mayor. There's position 9, position 8. Man, it would be good to get, I guess the next round of questions is like, man, what's your position on this? How can you support? How can electeds here support what's going on down there in Olympia? How can existing council members who aren't up for election, how can you be supported? We hear lots of blah, blah, blah. So, it would be good. It looks like there's a real deal fight going on down in Olympia, man. Let's see where you're at on this side of the issue. So
that's right.
We'll move on here. We've got this clip from CBS this morning, the update of the Derrick Chauvin trial out in Minneapolis.
In Minneapolis, Derrick Chauvin's murder trial resumes this morning, with more police officers expected to testify for the prosecution. The city's police chief told the jury yesterday that Chauvin violated police standards and training when he held his knee on George Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes. Jamie Yukas is outside the courthouse with more on this story. Jamie, why are the prosecutors calling these police officers to the stand? Because this is highly unusual to see police testifying against other policemen.
Yeah, Gail, you're absolutely right. It's rare to have officers testify against former officers on trial. Prosecutors are trying to give the jurors information about police procedures. And according to the police chief, Chauvin should have stopped the neck restraint once Floyd stopped moving. The chief told jurors Chauvin's actions ran against the department's policies and ethics.
To continue to apply that level of force to a person proned out, handcuffed behind their back, that in no way, shape, or form is anything that is by policy, it is not part of our training, and it is certainly not part of our ethics or our values.
Minneapolis Police Chief Madira Arredondo told jurors Monday former officer Derrick Chauvin did not follow proper policies.
While it is absolutely imperative that our officers go home at the end of their shift, we want to make sure and ensure that our community members go home too. And so sanctity of life is absolutely vital.
The chief told the court Chauvin failed to provide even basic aid to George Floyd.
The defendant violated our policy in terms of rendering aid.
The defense made the point that at the time of Floyd's death, both conscious and unconscious neck restraints were allowed.
Both were permitted under Minneapolis police policy on May 25th of 2020. Agreed?
Yes.
But the chief asked to clarify.
It is contrary to our training to indefinitely place your knee on a prone, handcuffed individual for an indefinite period of time.
Inspector Katie Blackwell oversaw the department's training at the time.
I don't know what kind of improvised position that is. So that's not what we train.
CBS News legal analyst Ricky Kleeman.
Does Derrick Chauvin almost have to take the stand to defend himself now?
There are very few cases where I feel that a defendant needs to testify. The only person who can say that he thought that he wasn't causing enough harm for death or serious bodily injury because he had done this maneuver before is Derrick Chauvin.
Focusing on use of force is just one part of the prosecution's case. The other is proving to the jury that Chauvin's knee on George Floyd's neck led to his death. Yesterday, the emergency room doctor who tried to revive Floyd testified he died from lack of oxygen. That is a crucial argument in the prosecution's case. Chauvin's defense countered that could be related to the drugs in Floyd's system. Tony?
And it all come down to the jury. Jamie, thank you very much.
The drugs in Floyd's system. I mean, come on. At this point, it just really feels like the defense is grabbing at straws here, when we talk about the fact that so many now, the trainer, the police officers are coming out and saying, that's not how we train. She's like, I don't know what kind of improvised move that was right there or stance that was right there. That is key to this. We cannot be ignorant to say that he was not able to breathe. He said that he was calling for his mama in his last final words. And ultimately, we have to actually understand what took place there. And the fact that the other officers were just allowing it to happen. They also knew that that was not the training that they were provided. And that was not the procedure that that Derrick Chauvin should have been using in that particular case. I like how they point out also that, hey, he was restrained, already had the handcuffs on. So the ideas initially that were coming out that Derrick Chauvin was in fear of his life or thought there was some type of harm to his life, and that's why he was using that maneuver. Obviously, that can also be disbanded here. So again, I mean, this is some of the things that the defense are saying just seem really that they are grabbing at straws, though.
Well, yeah, that's all the defense can do, and we need to really keep remembering here that George Floyd is not on trial.
That's right.
No matter how and what people try to place it out there, he's not on trial. And we're seeing something here that you hardly ever see. You see a chief of police, you see the training officers, you see the sergeant on patrol. There's so many different people in the Minneapolis Police Department that have come out on this. But we'll stay on top of it. This trial is definitely moving along at a brisk pace. And so tomorrow we'll have another update. Wanted to remind everybody in the second half of the show, and some people leave up the first half. The second half of the show, we're going to have a conversation about the silence that we hear not only in our community, but across the city at the loss of life of Black people, especially gun violence here in the city of Seattle. We get a lot of noise when the police or somebody white kills our Black kids. But when we kill ourselves, there's a deaf ear. So we're going to have a conversation on that. Wanted to change the narrative here real quick. And in changing the narrative, came across this ad that was produced by Procter & Gamble with a mostly Black crew. And the concept behind it is to widen the screen. And in widening the screen, let's change the way that people perceive or view Black people and Black stories.
If you think you know what happens next, ask yourself why. These are the Black stories we've been shown. A narrow view that limits our understanding. But there's so much more to see. Of Black life. Let's widen the screen so we can widen our view.
Wow. Oh, I love that. You know what? Oh, as a Black woman, we understand the depth, and I understand, just as a Black person, understand the depth of the wide variety of our experiences. And for a company like Procter & Gamble to say, let's widen the screen, let's showcase the wide variety of how Black people really are just people, right? I mean, that's really what struck me there is, you think something because of what has been constantly replicated throughout major movies, major media, what people assume to be the truth. And yet there are so many more stories to be told. I'm so thankful that, people are able to kind of see it through that lens. I know that Converge, myself, we really work to showcase the wide breadth of so much of Black brilliance, because really there is everyday life happening on top of what people may think they know. And so that's a great way of showcasing it, man. That gave me chills. That was beautiful.
Yeah, I knew you would like that one. And the thing is, people need to keep in mind that what we see in the news is a small representation of who we are. There's 117 historically Black colleges and universities. People graduating every year, going on with life, productive members of society and everything else. But it's the very worst of I guess you would say around us that's really perpetuated and magnified and amplified. And the thing is, in traditionally in other cultures, especially predominant culture here, there's a counterbalance, right? So you get to see the counterbalance. You get to see some crazy movie, but then you also get to see some love story. Then you also get to see, what I'm saying, Third Rock from the Sun. Then you also get to see Discovery Channel. Then there's so many things in media that bring balance to an overall perception of how a culture is perceived. And a lot of that is lacking in our community, not only in our community, but just on a national scale. And I think that conversation is important to widen the screen, to widen your view of Black life here in America.
I love it. And I agree with you 100%. I think oftentimes we get really engulfed in some of these headlines that we see. And we understand that, it's kind of major media's job a bit. When you talk about the competition around major media and its sensationalizing of certain stories, that's unfortunately how many people experience Black culture, Black people. But I love the fact that, we also have the opportunity to widen ourselves. There, like you said, there's a wide variety of ways and channels and streaming services where you can embrace other narratives and embrace this kind of general nature of how so many Black people experience their lives here. Everything is not one way. We always talk about how, Black community is not a monolith. That right there is another example of just that.
Right. And, the thing is as well, is Black struggle has been romanticized in Hollywood and in the news. You wouldn't believe how many people who interviewed me were disappointed because I didn't have this story of like, oh, me and my brothers had to fight over one piece of bologna and it was 7 of us in the bed and we had to go and wire the electricity or something. Like, they're disappointed. I was like, man, I had a good childhood. You know what I'm saying? Let's go to summer camp. We went skiing. You know what I'm saying? Believe it or not, 100 pounds ago, I was a good skier up there, up in Snoqualmie. I mean, there's so many. This is the actual everyday Black story. But the struggle is romanticized. And I'm telling you, I mean, especially early on, a lot of people were disappointed because they wanted me to tell them some story of struggle and strife. I'm like, nah, it's just pretty normal, to be honest with you. And my story is way more representative of the Black story than the story of the romanticized struggle and redemption, which is a relevant and true story in our community as well. And I'm not negating that, but a lot of times that's the only story that ever gets any light.
Absolutely. Oh, and I agree with you 100%. I think even as I've been able to tell my story of gentrification, right? I always go back to the resilience, right? The fact that my grandmother, she still stays so connected to Mount Calvary Christian Center. That is her church. Like I said the other day, now that they're back in session, she's so happy to get dressed up, dolled up, and get to church. And ultimately, there is still such a fabric of it that really is, settled, and the foundation is so much love. It really is that there is just love in Black families, that my mother and father have been taking care of my grandmother for over 20 years because we believe in caring for our elders, you know what I mean? And not necessarily discarding them for someone else to take care of them. There is a large variety of ways that we express love in Black families and in Black community. And I think that those narratives are really the things that need to be bolstered because there is so much almost propaganda messaging that has really utilized that struggle story. And as you said, romanticizing it so that people can feel like, wow, look at what Black people go through. But also the fact that, hey, we can do a lot of different things. I lived in the woods for 6 weeks, rebuilding vegetation as a young Black girl, right? And, I learned my love for the environment through those experiences. And just like you said, me and my brothers, we went to summer camps. We did swimming lessons. We did all of these things that, are just considered general things for any family, let alone be an American Black family. So I agree with you all. I love that messaging of widening the lens, widening the screen. I think it's important because that right there was really phenomenal. And you and I are just real examples of what it means to have a great childhood, a great background, and do what we love as adults.
That's what's up. Hey, we're going to take a short break right now. When we come back, actually what we're going to do is we're going to break and then we're going to go straight into this video. So I'll set the video up right now. Yesterday, the Court of Appeals made a ruling on this case surrounding Adley Shepard. Adley Shepard was a Seattle police officer who, during an arrest, punched a woman who was in the back of a squad car and fractured her skull. And the SPD fired Shepard, but then an arbitrator reinstated Shepard, and then a King County judge said, nah, he should be fired. And it went to the appeals court, and a ruling came out yesterday in that case. Now, I interviewed Kevin Schofield last night. He lays a lot of it out, but just to let everybody know, we're going to go to a commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to go into my interview with Kevin Schofield about the appeals court ruling yesterday. You're watching the Morning Update Show.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Back on this rap ish, I ain't even broke a sweat, homie, this practice. Pondering my next move, staring at my track list, hope I ain't miss my window. Praying like a Baptist, Seattle's own, tired of this Game of Thrones. They made a list of the best rappers and guess who wasn't on? While the disrespect continues, I'm steady packing these venues.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. Support Converge Media today via Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at Converge Media.
So this started back in June 2014. Officer Shepard was on duty. He was called to a domestic disturbance incident where there's a bunch of things going on. He ended up arresting an intoxicated, fairly belligerent woman, handcuffed her. He was trying to put her into the backseat of his police car. She kind of leaned back, brought her foot up and kicked him in the face. And about 2 seconds later, he reached in and punched her in the face and broke the skull bone next to her eye socket. This is investigated, and he was found to have violated. He was found to have used excessive force, which was a policy violation for SPD. And Chief O'Toole, who was the police chief at the time, terminated him. SPOG, the police union, appealed this on his behalf, and this went to an arbitrator, what they call the Discipline Review Board, which is an arbitration board. And in June of 2018, they held a hearing on this, and in November 2018, the arbitration board found that the firing was excessive, overturned that, instead gave him a 15-day suspension, although it gave SPD the right to not reinstate him as a patrol officer, but had to give him a job back again, right? The city appealed that. King County Court judge overturned the reinstatement of him and said, no, the city has a right to fire him. SPOG appealed that. So there's been a whole bunch of different appeals along the way now. SPOG appealed that to the Court of Appeals, and that was the ruling that came down today. And the Court of Appeals said that the King County Court got this right, that the city SPD has every right to terminate Officer Shepard. So they upheld that termination. So what the appeals court said today was, the decision reinstating Shepard is so lenient, it violates the explicit, well-defined, and dominant public policy against excessive use of force in policing. Indeed, the decision sends a message to officers that a violation of a clear and specific policy is not that serious if the officer is dealing with a difficult subject, losing patience, or passion and believing that he did nothing wrong, however mistaken that belief may be. Such a message cannot be squared with the public policy against the excessive use of force in policing, which we hold imposes on the city an affirmative duty to sufficiently discipline officers. So the appeals court really came down hard on arbitration ruling and said that the arbitration ruling was just wrong. It was way too lenient, and that the city absolutely has the right to discipline him appropriately, including terminating him for this. This case sort of brings out kind of, both the sides of this. One is, The city could say, in fact, this is one of the things they told Judge Robart, because this case with Adley Shepard was, you could argue, the prime reason that Judge Robart found the city out of compliance with the consent decree a couple of years back. And what the city came back and said, no, we appealed that. The system is working. We appealed it. Sometimes arbitrators do weird things, but the system worked. The courts looked at this and they overturned it, and that's part of their message today. But the other thing you can say is, why on earth should a labor lawyer be able to overturn the chief of police's experience and decision making on what the appropriate discipline is for an officer in this case, right? Which is what happened. So why would you ever have an arbitration panel overturning, the discipline decisions of the chief of police? So that's kind of, in an essence, the two decisions that are being wrestled with, or the two kind of perspectives that are being wrestled with in this case.
So this is actually a timely decision right now, because down in Olympia, that's one of the things that they're talking about is the collective bargaining and arbitration and some of everything else. And what we see right here is the SPD, they had fired Shepard, but SPOG, the union, the arbitrator, they went and, Shepard got his job back, and then they went, to court with King County. King County said no, the chief should be able to fire the officer, and now the appeals court upheld that decision.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Real quick, want to let everybody know the link to the full interview is coming right now into the comments.
Well, I think it's really important here that I like how Kevin ended it there. What kind of precedence is being set if arbitration, a lawyer that's involved in arbitration can be the one that then is pressing for, a reverse of something like the police chief decision. And I think it's very clear here that, no, we really do need to respect, as he said, the expertise, the length of service, the understanding in terms particularly of the nuance that happens with regard to these kinds of cases. And I am glad that the court's decision was upheld here. Clearly, the chief of police at the time really felt that that was a violation of their policy. He, as an officer, utilized undue aggression, maybe undue harm that he caused to a suspect in the backseat of his car. And I think this is something that really is a step in the right direction in terms of setting the precedence here for upholding how the city decides to deal with its employees in particular departments.
Right. Well, the city and the Seattle Police Department, they fired the officer. But, this is the appeals court went hard on the arbitration process, like real hard. I would invite people to go check out the full interview. It's only 11 minutes, but Kevin breaks a lot of stuff down. We're going to take a short break right now. When we come back, we're going to have a discussion here about, the murders that are occurring here in Seattle and King County and the deafening silence surrounding it. You're watching the Morning Update Show.
Public Health, Seattle, King County, Zero Youth Detention, along with our partners from across the South King County region, are committed to reducing violence and creating the conditions needed for our neighborhoods to be safe and free of crime. Too often, the response to crime and violence has been a piecemeal approach with a program here and a program there. When family units collapse, schools fail to educate, the economy fails to produce jobs, and crime rises, we've looked to law enforcement and punitive measures to save us. Nothing could be more wrong or further from the truth. Law enforcement can't shoulder all the burden or take the rest of us off the hook. We are acknowledging the lived experiences of Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. We are centering community as the experts who can effectively identify key issues related to systems, policies, and practices that impact children, families, and communities of color across this region. Those most impacted by the issues will help call out and identify the root causes, including structural and systemic factors. 150 residents will partner with King County to develop strategies, solutions, and an action plan that explicitly addresses system changes needed and eliminates barriers to access for Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks. These residents will also identify the criteria used to measure our collective success. Simply put, we need your help as we do the work needed to make King County the safest in this country. It will take specific commitments from all of us, community members, our young people, elders, and leaders from the sectors all across this region. Together, we will get this work done. Please click the link below and sign up for a work group. Or you can recommend a co-facilitator from community for each work group. We look forward to hearing your ideas, concerns, feedback, and solutions as we build a community where all our children can be happy, healthy, hopeful, safe, and thriving.
All right, welcome back to the Morning Update Show. My name is Omari Salisbury here in Converge Media Studios.
And I'm Trey Holiday at Holiday Studios.
Holiday Studios on and cracking, huh?
Yeah, Nikki hooked me up. I told you, man, we elevated my production value over here.
I'm ready to go into the Holiday Studios refrigerator over there and grab some. Our refrigerator here is bare. Man, you know, wanted to talk about something real serious here, and man, what's been occurring, and it's tragically generationally here in Seattle, and man, this is the murder of mostly young black males by other young black males in our city, and it's usually a lot of silence around it. Now, Marcus Harrison Green, we go ahead and put this up. Marcus Harrison Green, this is in the Seattle Times and the South Seattle Emerald. Opinion, one more time. Ooh, that was fast. When black men are killed in Seattle's South End, why does society shrug? And, you know, this is something that we've been talking about here on Converge, but because what's occurring in our community is part and parcel of who we are as a media company, and oftentimes either directly or indirectly we're impacted by these murders or violent assaults that are happening in our community. And Marcus Harrison Green hits a lot of points there that when we die and we're killed by each other, people just shrug their shoulders.
Yeah, I mean, he points out so many great things in this article. Shout out to you, Marcus, for, you know, understanding a real need to write about it in the way that you did with that kind of perspective. I love how he settles this in his personal anecdotal narrative around his friend Latrell, who was killed years ago, and how Latrell's mother is still looking for justice, still has unanswered questions about her son's death. And there is a great parallel to that, to so many other families who are experiencing that very same dread, where it's like, hey, you know, all I know is that my family member, my son, my brother, you know, my uncle, my nephew, all I know is that he was killed, you know, and it killed in a violent way by gun violence. And there's not enough information that the police have around these cases. And some of the things that Marcus really hits home for me, because when he talks about, you know, gun violence being the leading cause of death among Black males ages 15 to 34, that it's not only the leading cause, it's also outnumbering the next 9 causes of death for that particular demographic. And I think that that is so huge. Again, sometimes the ways that the data showcases these numbers and what we know people are experiencing throughout Black communities throughout the country is very stark, because yes, we see it, and I think that sometimes we don't understand it, but when you understand the data and those numbers, it's really hard to disassociate from the severity of this issue. And also the fact that when it's Black on Black crime, it's met with indifference. You know, that's that shrug, man. You know, that's what's happening. And one thing he also says that I really appreciated was, why is this considered a byproduct of Black culture? that's not the case. And as we were just talking about in a previous segment, that, look, let's widen the screen, widening the lens, showcasing the wide variety of ways that Black people experience life in this country. And I think you and I both having really great backgrounds, being able to go to college, go to HBCUs, experience life. We really are examples of that. But when he said that, it was like, yes, why do people assume that that's just a byproduct of Black culture instead of understanding it as a byproduct of discrimination, poverty, all of the things that this country has essentially put on the backs of Black people? And I just appreciate so many of the highlights that he really pinpoints here in this article.
Right. Well, we've seen it here play out in our fair city, and we saw this with the shooting up there at NAM, and we saw how, whether it was activists or whether it was the media, how they responded, right? And when we talk about the shooting up there at NAM, there was a lot of uproar and headlines because the police had shot this Black man, right? And there wasn't too much conversation about the victims at all. No one was really talking too much about the victims. It isn't until we humanized the story and said that the victims were random acts of violence, because maybe there was an assumption that, maybe it was drug deal gone bad, or maybe it was this or that or whatever, that then we saw a shift in the narrative across the city. People were like, oh, well, man, how can we do a GoFundMe? How can we help the victims? How can we do all these kind of things? And it's crazy, because it's like we had to prod people to care. What if it wasn't a random act of violence? People wouldn't have cared. It's amazing in our city how people's humanity is directly aligned with their political ideology. And that's such a tragedy of what we see here in Seattle. It's only when a murder occurs that it's aligned with your political ideology that you actually care. Well, we're in a position in our neighborhood that, man, we got to care about everybody. We can't be a la carte. Well, care about this right here. The police killed this person, but, well, I'm not going to care about this one. Somebody Black killed this person. And now it's true. It's two separate streams, two separate arguments. It's very different when the state and the government is killing people, But I want to be clear, and it's so perplexing to me, Trey Holiday, how we live in a city where there can be so much outrage on one death, but total silence on another.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Omari. I mean, this is something that we have seen play out time and time again. And the repetition of people's stances and the repetition of where people put their energy is very clear. And this is why his article was so timely. Every time we talk about Black death, I always am saying, man, thinking about the families, because ultimately it is the families that are still longing for answers. It is the family that is looking for justice. It is the family that has to deal with the loss of that family member. And ultimately, there are so many connections. They say this all the time about Washington State. Black population is pretty small, right? We are very small. There's a lot of connectivity amongst us. And it doesn't matter really what high school you went to. If you were like in the Seattle metropolitan area, oftentimes it's a stone's throw away from my brother knowing your brother or knowing your nephew or your cousin. It's always some type of connection. And we do this at home often, in our 3 generations, where it's like my grandmother knew their auntie, my mom, went to school with their cousin. It's always this kind of connectivity. And ultimately, we all end up mourning and grieving for that family. We are all like, you know what, man, we need to take a moment here. Let's pray for them. Let's pray for their strength. Let's do something and meditate on positivity for them. There's always a feeling that we experience, no matter who it is, when we start, even if it takes a couple of weeks for us to realize, oh man, that was who my little sister went to school with. And, there's just always these kind of connections that happen in Black community. And I realize realized when I was reading this article, you know, that Marcus and putting it in such a personal narrative, it really struck me because I thought, man, it's so normal for us, for me to call my brothers, for me to check with my sister, my mom, my grandmother, my grandfather, to say, hey, do you guys know this person? Was there a connection here? It's almost so innate in me. It's just a natural reaction when I hear about Black death, regardless. And so I think that it is important again. And as Procter and Gamble was showing, hey, widen the lens here, because everything isn't relegated to just gang violence or something like that. Almost every time we talk about Black death, I gotta uplift the story of my friend Tyrone Love. He was a person that embodied love, and yet the officers originally believed off the bat that he was involved in some type of gang activity. And so many of his friends and family and community members had to speak up and say, absolutely not this one right here. And it's another example of how it affects all of us.
Right. You know, and Seattle is so interesting. This is how deeply tied Seattle's humanity at times is so deeply tied to political ideology. Look at Derrick Hayden. Derrick Hayden, 44 years old, Seattle University student, was down there on the waterfront, clearly mental distress, had a knife. He was harming himself. Apparently, Port of Seattle police tried to deploy a less than lethal. That failed. We see on the body cam footage, Hayden is on the tape. He's like, please kill me. And he was killed. Now, Derrick Hayden, 44 years old, college student, clearly in mental distress, had a knife. There's a lot of different things here over this timeline in Seattle SPD with knives. It's about Charlena Lyles. It's about John T. It's about Hightower. Here this is right here, where there's somebody with a knife and killed by the police, and the whole city is quiet. Like the majority of the big white activists are quiet. And I can only assume it's because he's white. And that's how crazy it is here in Seattle, that white people ain't even saying nothing about white people. And some of these same white people would be the same people who's in the streets if Derrick Hayden was Black. But because these things occur and it's not aligned with a specific ideology, people's humanity don't just activate. That case around Derrick Hayden was a perfect opportunity for people in Seattle to come to the table, to have a real discussion with the Seattle Police Department. Hey, what are some of the methods and tools when someone has a knife? Does it always have to be the first thing is to go and to shoot? Where is the CIT team? Where is different stakeholders, everything else? I mean, what an opportunity to come to the table here. And we hear silence. We hear total silence. And I have to say that if Derrick Hayden would have been Black out down there on the waterfront, this would be a paramount issue in this city. So it's like white people don't even care about white people if they're not aligned with their specific ideology. It's wild here, man.
Yeah, you know what? You mentioned such a valid point here, because we talked about this with regard to prosecuting attorneys, right? That go after real specific cases that seem to have the headlines necessary to elevate either them, their careers, put them in the spotlight when they take on these harder cases that are, public facing cases. And I think you're absolutely right here that it had Derrick been a Black male, we would have seen so much more uproar about the police tactics in that particular case. This is an issue because ultimately life is life. And when life is taken, there has to be more measures that are done in a public way that showcase, hey, we care about the humanity. We care about actually having compassion. And when we talk about the need, the desperate need that we have in our city and throughout our state for there to be more folks that can kind of get deployed to these situations that understand understand mental health tactics, de-escalation in a different way that does not involve guns or does not involve police. We talk about this all the time. And I think that it's so important when we see the dichotomy between, hey, if it was front page news, then you may have some to hotline prosecutor saying, yes, I'm coming out, defense attorney, yeah, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. They come to the cases that they feel are going to promote their careers. But it's also true for folks that are on the activist side, for folks that are, speaking out, even from certain community sides, that when it fits the narrative, then we can go after it. But the truth of the matter is that life is life, and all life really is special. It's precious. We need to understand it in that regard. And I think that something Marcus really points out here in this article is that no loss of life should be met with indifference. It doesn't matter however it comes about. It should be met with some real care. And that's ultimately what I feel is missing majority of the time. If it's not going to be some headline case or something that's going to allow for the arousal of that sensationalism of it, man, we need to be thinking about it from a generalistic standpoint. And life is life here. Oh,
well, I'll say this is that, Converge, maybe it's just that we have a unique perspective, and I'm not trying to make excuses for anybody, but maybe because we report on these murders and we're impacted by these murders. There's a lot of people that are in these spaces that are activated, whether it's activists, whether it's politicians, whether it's media, and there's no connection per se, right? But we're connected to all of these things. And Converge is in a unique space, and I think that's why we need to keep talking about this, because when a murder occurs in our community, right? When a murder occurs, a lot of times, either directly or indirectly, we're impacted, and that whole neighborhood and community is traumatized. And so we have a perspective of seeing everything. And we're in the place where we're impacted emotionally by so many of these things. And I would just say that as a city, we need to do better at being indifferent in our humanity. Let's try that. Let's try to be humane to everybody here. Let's not, it's just some black people killing each other in the South then. Let me go get my latte. But then all of a sudden, if somebody else is killed, police kill somebody black, you ready to take it to the streets? Let's take it to the streets on everything. My mama used to always say, how we do anything is how we do everything. So, man, let's keep that same energy. And I mean, these lives that are being taken in South Seattle, across King County, I mean, man, these were people, they mattered. They walked this way. They walked this earth. And just want to, again, before we break out of this, give a big shout out to Marcus Harrison Green for making sure to keep this top of head awareness around the indifference that is seen when it's black people killing each other here in the city of Seattle and King County. We're going to take a real quick break right now. When we come back, we got something real special from King County former council member Larry Gossett. You're watching the Morning Update Show. Welcome back to the Morning Update Show. Where's my buddy at? Hey. There she is. Okay, so we always gotta want to end on a good note. I had the fortune of being here in the studio the other day when former King County council member and council chair and civil rights icon Larry Gossett, it actually came to the studio to film something else for the MLKCC event on April 4th. He was here to film that. And I said, don't you think you're getting ready to be here in the studio on camera and just leave and not share something with us? So I got a clip right here of where Larry Gossett explains that he's the only U.S. lawmaker who actually held office in the exact same space where he was once in jail.
I am the only elected official in the United States of America whose office was located in the same spot where his jail cell once was. And the reason for that is that the King County Jail was on the top 3 floors of the King County Courthouse all the way up to 1986. And most of the time that I went to jail for being a black community activist here in this community was between the years 68 and 75. So that little unique occurrence is due to the fact that we were fighting for black political involvement at a higher level than before. The reason I was arrested on April 4th, 1968 is because on March 29th of that year, we had been called down, the Black Student Union at the University of Washington had been called down to Franklin High School by black students who were in an uproar over the fact that 2 black girls, their fellow students, had been kicked out of school for wearing their hair natural. The principal sent them home with a note that says, your daughter can no longer attend Franklin High School until her hair looks ladylike. So the principal wanted them to go back in the back room and straighten their hair to be acceptable to be a beautiful woman. And they wanted to be their natural selves. So the students got organized. We went down there, organized the sit-in. We got the girls reinstated in school. We got Franklin to commit to hiring the first African-American history teacher in the city. We got Franklin to commit to hiring a black principal starting that next school year. And then 38 years after I got arrested, I ended up being elected to the King County Council. And by that time, our offices were at the top 2 floors of the county courthouse.
Larry Gossett right there. But before you comment on that, I just want to throw this out. I see this in the comments here. People are like, no, there were vigils and everything else talking around Derrick Hayden. And there were, and I'm not disregarding that. What I am saying is that the bigger voices in our city, right? We didn't hear from any city council members. We didn't hear from the mayor. You know, we didn't hear from anybody. We didn't hear from a lot of the people that traditionally bring pressure to bear. And so I don't want to disregard, and I'll be very clear, don't want to disregard because there were vigils and everything else. But the people who would traditionally speak on what happened to Derrick Hayden were quiet. And the people in power and the people who've been leading organizations for a very long time were very quiet. And I think a lot of that has to do is because he was white.
Yeah. I'm glad that you were able to address that. And we definitely want to always, acknowledge the things that were done. But I think that our point stands very clear. Thank you, Omari, for clarifying it for the audience. And I just got to say, wow, Larry Gossett. I mean, when we talk about so many amazing Black activists and that turned politician, whatever they did, the fact that there was a strong presence of Black activism happening right here in Seattle, throughout the city during the civil rights era. And I love that he was able to give us a real glimpse of what it was like for him as an activist and then getting to that seat. It's really a great story. I'm glad you were able to capture that while he was in studio. And thank you for having the foresight to know, wait a minute, Mr. Gossett, you got to give us a little bit something while you're here in the studio. So that was really great, Omari. It's a great story.
Yeah, he wasn't going to leave the studio without that. People should know, and council member Gurmai Zahalai now sits in the exact same seat that the council member Larry Gossett once had. Council member Zahalai likes to say that, we both went to Franklin and and some everything else. But man, these guys were Jesus. This is a generation ago, you know what I'm saying? And they're elders now, and and everything else. I mean, 60s, even longer than one generation. They're elders now, but I mean, those guys were putting in work back in the day. So it's good to acknowledge council member Gossett. Before we get out of here, Trey, up against the hour, any last words?
As always, I think that, Marcus's article really hits home here for me. And I just want to say, I'm always saying, see yourself as a part of the solution. And some of you may wonder, what does that mean? And it really is about educating yourself, about getting yourself out there, stretching your understanding and information that you can then pass on to those in your peer group, those in your family, your children, your colleagues, because as you become educated, and then you uplift these stories, you uplift the understanding of those around you. And that's also being a part of the solution. So don't forget to ever see yourself as a part of the solution.
True indeed. Man, it's a Tuesday. I think I might be off. Actually, so I'll tell everybody this. So I'm interviewing Tiffany Washington. That's the deputy mayor of Seattle. That's actually later on tonight. It's going to air on Sunday. But otherwise, no programming notes here. I think we're good to go. Nikki Barron is on her way back from vacation, so the Coronavirus Update show will be back on air soon. And otherwise, I guess that's it for me. So I'll remind everyone, go forward in your purpose, go forward in your humanity, and until tomorrow at 11 a.m. Peace.
Lift every voice and sing till earth in heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day.